My name is Anna, and today I'd like to talk about some very important people in my life. Luckily, all of them are contained, or maybe not so much so, within one physical being, an island girl, an artist, a poet, and so much more. Her name is Nori. She also happens to be my mother, and she is sitting right next to me here today. Hey, Nori, how's it going?
Just great, Anna. Hi, everyone.
So, I guess what I wanted to talk to you about a little bit outside of, growing up all in one place is just, do you find that over time you've turned into more than one person, or do you think other people have always been there? I'm curious.
Well, I know I have 4 others than myself. I actually have 5, but 2 of them are called the timeshare twins because one gets 6 months of the year and the other one gets the other 6 months. So I don't think I've exceeded the legal limit of characters. There's a famous play by, I can't remember the guy's name, called 6 Characters in Search of an Author. So we have 4.5, 5 characters, 4 characters, who can count?
They're in search of an author. Does that mean that they're telling stories all the time?
Well, I mean, that's the theory in the play. I didn't write the play. They've been telling stories in my head for years. I just didn't really recognize them as anything other than myself. I think Mackenzie was the first one I recognized. I named her as somebody that, if only people knew that that's who I really was. And like I said, the first time I spoke about her, and that's the first time I have any awareness of her, was when I was 11 or 12, and I said to my friends, well, really, I was adopted, you see, and I used to be a Mackenzie, which was actually my grandmother's first husband's last name, so there is a connection. But she didn't stick her head out again until I was involved in this peculiar tape to digital project about 20 some odd years ago, where the person I was working with kept pushing and pushing and pushing for more and more and more. And then all of a sudden she came out with this little wee poem, which was like, "Oh, what have you done to me, O'Leary, poor quarter mortal that I am?" And it was signed Mackenzie Page. And that's the second time I really met her.
So it was a little time, but all the time she was kind of there.
There.
And never entirely disappeared.
Well, Tex, for instance, he's been around probably since my teen years. And I never knew he was there, except that whenever I get drunk, he'd come out. Or, exuberant in any form. And punctuate his what he says with his pithy sayings with a little spit. That's what he does.
That makes sense. So we've met a little bit of Mackenzie. We've met a little bit of Tex, who came out later on, and he's got that kind of an attitude, I guess, where he's just like, keep on going.
Yeah, well, he's very laconic. Gary Cooper, I think, is his model in Along Came Jones, which is a really good, funny movie from, I think it's the 1940s. Anyways, Along Came Jones, 1956. So the next one to come along was probably Olga, because I hung out with Russian people, and what can I say? I like Olga likes talking to people.
So she's a bit more social than some of the other guys there.
Yeah. And she can't decide if she's Russian or Polish, but, but who's counting? And then there's the ones that came last, which are the timeshare twins. I haven't actually heard their voice because, well, they write and draw, right? That's what they do. So Cassandra is here from November 1st to April 30th. And she is in classical Greek mythology. She's the woman who always tells the truth and nobody ever believes her. So found myself, you see the confusion, I found myself making predictions, but I wouldn't do it until November, and I couldn't figure out why, and then I would peter off in the spring. Persephone was kept underground all winter long, so she comes up on May 1st, and she leaves, on October 31st. So Cassandra finds it far too bright in the summer. She's quite happy to go somewhere where it's darker. Yeah, this is actually black, not charcoal, but powdered pigment on a slick board.
So Olga, that's what she is.
That's Olga, yeah. And these two are digital. They come from photos from my camera of very badly resolved photos of a particular hosta is growing around the ponds at Beacon Hill Park, and I saw this character in the leaves, and then this one came from that one, and that one was about 30 years ago, I think.
Okay, and those are both digitally, the digitally represented pictures that you can see, kind of entirely different seasons represented, but you've got the same character there.
Yeah, she's the leaf girl was what I called her originally, and then she turned into two people around that time. So, and then Mackenzie was, when is that? That says that was 2011 was when that picture came out. I wasn't trying to draw her; she just showed up.
She does that, I think.
She does that, yes, she does that. And if she doesn't like what you do, she looks at you sort of. They call it cutting your eyes. You know, she cuts her eyes towards you, and you find yourself looking for the stain, like, you know, or the open zipper, or.
Some people are so good at that. They practice it with time too. By the end, their eyes speak more volumes than their voice ever could.
But she's mostly on the page, right? She's when I write and draw too, but in a different sort of way. She's the archivist. She's the one who says, "Oh no, just give me some time. The information's in there somewhere. I'll get it." It's the only time when she ever apologizes, you know, is for her speed.
Oh, but otherwise, she's quite certain about where she's at, where she's going, and what she's doing, and she doesn't look back, it sounds like, much at all.
No. Well, she can't. You see, she's got this sort of throne behind her. Kind of hard to see behind you when you're sitting in a throne. Now, there's a philosophical implication.
Oh, boy. That is interesting. So, is there one of them that comes out more depending on what you're writing? Fiction, nonfiction, poetry?
Well, I first figured out the timeshare twins from my writing. It was basically the difference in the writing style from the winter to the summer. Looking back at what I'd written and recognizing the difference in tone. And then I had the other three characters, and I was grasping. I knew there had to be a fourth, just for stability, if nothing else. You know, like a four-legged table versus a three. It's more stable if it's level. So I started casting about, and then I realized they were already there, and that would have been about, I just found these pictures today of the timeshare twins, but I named them about a year ago, roughly.
Sounds like slow glass, a long process, some of this is.
Yeah, Philip Glass has something to do with it in there, I think, too, but yes, the short story about slow glass is definitely something to look into if you're interested.
It's a good one. Take that one to Google and see what you can find. So how have they been useful? Actually, let me go back a little bit more. Do you think that a lot of people, most people, is this something that all of us kind of have within us, but not everybody's identified? Or do you think it's specific to specific people? How do you think it all kind of goes down?
I think it depends on the person. I think everybody has multiple characters inside of them. In a way, but most people don't recognize them as multiple characters, and it's possible that it's only those of us who try and write really hard or draw or do something creative, you know, and get older that we find out that it's easier, whether or not it's technically true. It's much easier to understand the way that one works this way. It's friction, I call it friction, right? It's not fiction and it's not fact. It's friction. It's the calluses you develop in your psyche from dealing with life.
Wow. That's
what these are.
Wow. Okay, I like that. So do you, like, sometimes when people write, they say that they don't remember writing it, or they weren't really, it wasn't coming out of them, it was coming through them. Is that what you feel when you're writing, or is it like depends on what you're writing?
No, it's Olga's all the way down.
That's a great phrase, and too comes from a great story, which we've also heard, which ends with it's turtles, 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 all the way down. And it's so useful depending on anything you're talking about. Oh, that's a lot of fun. All right, so you draw, but it's Olga. She's primarily involved in that side of things, do you think?
No, not at all. Ooh. She doesn't draw. She's cooking, cleaning, feeding, walking, talking to clerks. Day-to-day things, yeah. She's kind of like the housekeeper. She's a hard housekeeper. She's very useful, very efficient.
So she would come out at a different time than, say, Tex would. Tex doesn't come out when you're sweeping the floor.
No. Well, he doesn't. He doesn't like sweeping the floor. No, text would come out when I'm being exuberant for whatever reason, or laconic. It's like if somebody says something is happening on the news, and I go, well, da 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 da. That's text. I have to be fairly relaxed for him to show up. It used to take chemical interference, but not so much anymore.
Now he can get through the veil a little bit.
A little bit without having to drink an entire bottle of something like tequila first, yeah.
Is that his preferred drink?
Well, it depends. Sometimes he likes tequila, sometimes he likes scotch. They're both equally ruinous. Oh, gin, too, of course. Gin, too. Mother's ruin.
That's a good name for it. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, thank you for the introduction to the characters, and we've even maybe had a little bit of a chance to meet one or two of them along the way.
Well, you'll meet the timeshare twins in writing. I've never once heard them speak out loud. They speak to the page. Mackenzie speaks to the page, but she also speaks to me. So I've never really spent time trying to diagnose the interconnections. It sounds like the work of a lifetime. I don't know if I have that much left.
Says this young lady over here. No, that's perfect. And you know what? I really like this introduction, and it gets me excited because I was going to request, and I can do this right here and right now, if maybe next time you can bring out a little bit of the writing that maybe one or the other of them has done.
Oh, sure. I've got, lots.
I think that would be really nice.
Sure.
And a lot of fun. So today we've had an introduction. We've gotten to meet our new friend, and hopefully we're going to dive a little bit farther into art, poetry, and psychology. I mean, you can't help it. It always jumps in everywhere, doesn't it? Just that little bit.
It's not pornography, madam. It's physics. Well, we started out with the first 4.5, right? That was, Mackenzie Page and Tex and Olga and the timeshare twins, which was Persephone and Cassandra. So that's like 4.5. I mean, it's 4 almost because 2 of them are timeshare. They each only get a half a year, roughly. So, and since then, I've noticed and come up with 3 more. The other day, I was talking to Phil about something, and all of a sudden, this kind of really broad statement came out, and I went, "Who on earth was that?" And then I remembered that whole thing about how there's probably Black genes in my mother's side of the family going back in the American side. You could see it in my great aunt on her side. She's darker skinned than my actual grandmother, who's quite light red haired, I think. She's dark skinned, and she's called Olive, which I gather was a fairly common name for American girls who were a little dark skinned. So there's this drawing that I dug out of my files that was done back in 1980 when I was playing guitar, and I looked like a Black woman in it, and then so I put those together. I don't know, I'm speculating. Has it got to do with the percentage of genetic sharing going on, because maybe there's way less of the Black than there is of, say, the Métis, and because one of the other pictures in there is it makes me look French, and I think that goes back to the Métis aspect, which is theoretically French and Indian. So there's a lot of characters showing up. Actually, they're like they heard the job was open, I guess.
So they all applied for the position, and some of them got accepted.
Yeah, I'm not sure who yet, but I haven't heard much from them. That's absolutely for sure. The Métis woman and the Black woman are fairly low key.
So they don't come out all the time or on a daily basis or even on a monthly basis?
No, I would say, well, like I said, the Black woman, I think maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 50 years.
Why?
In retrospect, I mean, there may have been lots of others, but I don't remember them. Why?
Why do you think that she only comes out during those times?
Well, as I said, it could possibly be because she has a much smaller genetic share of my genetic makeup.
I like that theory.
It's just a theory. I don't know. It would be something for a statistician or somebody to figure out.
So all of the pictures that we're talking about, we're going to link underneath the episode so you can keep up to date. And this one's pretty cool. It's all hand drawn. And what year was that? 1980?
I'm guessing it was 1980. It was in this house very early. We moved in 79. So I'm guessing it was 1980 because Jerry was still around then. He hadn't left for Spain.
And Jerry's a friend of yours?
Yeah, from when we had our first student house where I was living when you showed up on the scene. He was a mature student from Prince George, and he was studying languages because he just come back from a world trip or two, and he just wanted to learn Spanish and French because he was so found was quite useful.
And then you guys sort of stayed friends ever since, on and off.
Off and on.
That's great. So have if they all share the same space, all of the characters, and different ones take up different percentages, do you think that it's the same all the time, or is it only like one comes out not very often, but maybe it holds more real estate even though you don't see it as often?
That's a good question.
Because, some people that don't say that much carry weight.
It's the sort of thing I would almost have to have a lot of video hours of myself, or have other people say, gee, what you just did, that sounds like a kind of, rural American black way of talking, which of course I don't have any personal experience with, but I've watched the same amount of movies and such like as other North Americans have in the last 50 years. So I don't know where it comes from, and I don't want to be racist either at the same time, but I don't know who that woman in that drawing is, but even back then, and I was like in my late 20s, I thought, oh, I like her. I wonder who she is.
I can see it with some of our features, though, and a broader nose and other kind of...
The broader nose, yes. It's also possibly from the Indian, the Métis side of things. It's hard to know. It's one of those things I keep meaning to do. Take one of those ancestral blood tests or something.
Maybe we'll have to do it and talk about the results sometime. That might be fun.
Oh, it'd be interesting.
It would be interesting. I'd be curious myself. I myself have a family coming from both sides, right? Because on your side, there's the Boston come
Nova Scotia. On my mother's side, it's Boston and Nova Scotia, and then back to Boston, and then to Lynn Valley, which is on the mainland here, and then to the island when my mother was about 3 in 1930. And on my father's side, it was possibly Mennonite, possibly Swiss, somewhere in the northeastern states or southeastern Canada, got crossed with Métis at some point, probably about 4 generations back. Let's see, my great grandfather on my mother's side it's very obvious in him. The implication was that it was his mother who was Métis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that goes back a ways.
That does. Oh, that's really interesting. So what I'm kind of hearing is that genetics might play a part in different personalities that we have within us.
I don't know. It's a good question. It certainly they seem to be taking on their roles in anything that I do outside of myself. So writing or drawing or taking pictures, whatever. It's not so much what I think, it's what I do, and it's seeing over so many decades, starting to see that, oh, well, this sort of belongs with that, and this sort of belongs with that. So it's what humans do, right? We cluster things to make them easier to carry around. We pack them better.
So if we can get 5, 6, or 7 sort of ideas or people into one person, that's really something we want to do. It's convenient.
Yeah, and it's a kind of portmanteau. Each individual then can carry a percentage of what's going on in my creative life. And so I don't have to go, well, where is that, and see this huge 100% field. I can say, well, is it one of this or one of this? It's like, where does this thing go? What is that thing?
So you're not like, I want to do some music on the piano, I better bring out my piano person. It doesn't work like that way around.
Maybe it does. Maybe that's my problem.
Hey, where are you?
I just don't want to share.
You go to do something and somebody else takes over.
Well, when I was 11 or 12 and playing piano all the time, I mean, it seemed like all the time. It was probably only an hour a day by that point. But, I remember I would, when friends would come over, I would show off. I would play something relatively complicated on the piano, like grade 6 or 7 level, something like that, And then I would turn and I would have a conversation with them while I was doing it, showing off.
Yes, of course.
that duo. So maybe one of you was playing the piano and another one of you was having the conversation, and you could keep it straight that way.
I must have been young.
They don't multitask the way they used to.
Oh,
That would be convenient, though. I mean, what is the difference between this and when people are talking about something like a split personality? I mean, psychologically, these don't seem like the same things to me, but I don't have the words to differentiate them.
well, when I was younger, maybe 17, 18, I was heavily invested in multiple personalities for a short period of time. I had just seen, I don't know, what was it called? The Seven Faces of Eve or something, something like that, about a woman who had individual characters that she didn't know about each other, and most of them didn't know about each other. And I remember trying that on with some friends of friends at the age of 17, drama, whatever. At that point, it was tragedy, it was drama, it was, movie world kind of stuff. And in a sense, after all the decades, it turns out it was actually probably fairly accurately perceived, but not with, like, I had this overlay. This is what the world says it is. So maybe I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I've known for years that I'm crazy, so I no longer have to ask that question.
Right. I'm comfortable with this fact. I can now move on to more important things.
Yeah, I have no mouth, and so I don't have to scream.
Wow. So layers upon layers upon layers. Do you think in layers then, whoever you are, like going back in time, or?
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's an idle occupation. It's sort of like counting fence posts or something, I suppose. Counting creative ancestors.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. Because we had been watching that Temple Grandin or reading the book years ago, and she mentioned something about if somebody mentions a dragon, she'll think of every single dragon she's ever known in her whole life, or shoes, right? Every single shoe she'd ever known.
Shoes in that school, and she couldn't understand the group concept of shoes, but she could describe every single pair of shoes she'd ever seen him wear.
Which is different, though, right? You're not filtering through it in that same way, right?
Yeah, it's the opposite of what I'm doing. What I'm doing is sort of, maybe from that point of view, it's kind of like a meta programming level. It's the level of grouping groups into smaller groups. It's the whole tree thing and organization. And it would be really nice if it showed up in my external world as well as it's showing up in my internal world. I must say, I'm not the most organized person in the world.
What about in your art, though? I mean, has anybody been popping up with the art you've been doing lately, or has it just been?
Well, mostly in the writing is where I see the differences. In fact, around spring last year, there was a conversation between, I'm not sure if it was, I don't remember if it was between or about Cassandra and Persephone, that they decided that they were both going to hang out for like a month or so, instead of one leaving as soon as the other one showed up on May 1st. So somewhere in that book back in May, there's writings that are by them or about them. I can't remember. I haven't really gone back and looked at it.
Interesting. So maybe when we meet next time, do you think we could hear something that they have written?
Sure. Yeah, that's right. I said I was going to do something like that.
It's okay. It's good to tease the audience a little. They like it.
Yellow stickies. Last week I'd said I just recognized this voice as being like a kind of down south black woman's voice coming out of me, and then I started looking into it and saying, who is she? And then I found a picture, which I did quite some years ago, that Anna has, will probably stick up somewhere, that I did, that I think is her. And then, because we were talking about poetry and yellow stickies and who was writing what, and I went through my book, I was really surprised to find I think it was about 3 months ago, a reference to specifically the body that all of these other characters were in. And, bodies are by definition genetic. So, I was fooling around with it, and all of a sudden I found myself going, oh, that's epigenetic. That's ephigenetic. Well, because this is complicated, but not all that complicated. My name is Nori, Nori. If you say it backwards, it's iron. Right, which is why I have Irony by Nori as a kind of a website sort of a name or whatever. So if Nori backwards is iron, and iron in the chemical symbols table is capital F small e, then Nori must be small e capital F because it's backwards. So out of EF, I got Effie. And then I remembered, oh, well, it was really funny. 20 years ago or more, I had this old lady that kept calling me on my business line saying, "Oh, is Effie there?" And I always sort of felt bad that I had to tell her there was no Effie here. And of course, now I feel even worse because
She was.
she was, and I didn't know it. So, and Effie became epigenetic because of epigenetic, which is talking about things that are passed on at a cellular level between possibly parent and descendants, not just in one person, but not because of the law of evolution. It's not actually modifying the DNA in the body. Epigenetic material is like a filter. It's a way of handling or dealing with the information that's in the DNA, and it can be passed on. You can end up with kind of memories, in a sense, of an immediate ancestor. Okay, so I'm just going to go right back to the beginning here. Do you mind, or do you want to?
Please. No.
Okay, so this is going back last year, January. This is the first thing that I think it's talking about Mackenzie, but I'm not sure. Assume the old woman speaks nothing but truth, although sometimes her truths are from a different timeline. So easy to get confused, don't you know, when the paths you have taken are so many and so long and somewhat alone. So I think that was Mackenzie, who doesn't usually speak except in poetry.
Right. So
Right.
she's a poetry girl.
She's not the only one, but she does. She's the old woman, and she does occasionally make reference to herself. So here's something that came around about a month before the May 1st deadline, when Persephone comes back up from underground and Cassandra disappears. We don't yet really know where. And so I'm not quite sure who's speaking to who here, but the poem is, "Sister, stay with me, a moon, no more, to share our learnings, smooth our paths, grow instead of going back and forth, dizzy for moons. Show me these arts I have lost underground, guide my hand to the line and the light, make the new old and the old new for a time while green overcomes." So now I know from reading that who that was, because that's Persephone.
Mm-hmm.
Show me these arts I have lost underground.
Of course, it
Yes.
fits.
Yeah, so she's not actually above ground yet, but she's sending a message to Cassandra. Cassandra's the one who always tells the truth and nobody believes her. So. Okay, this is June last year. Persephone has finally unpacked. We all breathe a sigh of relief. And Cassandra is halfway out the door already. 2 moons worth of sanity settles its veil over what is to come. And then on the same page, and around this is July, Olga says, "Sometimes you'll sit and wait, sit and wait, stand and wait, sit and wait, and the words you need are outside splashing in mud puddles, paying you no mind. What a grind."
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Oh, she's sassy.
Yeah, oh, she is, yes. September 3rd last year, cat scratches at the door. Miscreant, miscreant, miscreant. He is miscreanting. He miscreates. A miscreant miscreates, and Persephone dabbles once again before her descent. So that's her trying out her ditch before she disappears.
That rolls off the tongue. I like that.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, here we are. Effie, pass me the memories through that thread. Snake, hunger. Make the 5th voice from these 4 and float over top.
Ooh, no unnecessary words there.
No,
Not
and
a
on the
line.
right-hand side of the same page, it says epigenetic 5th wheel body corp. And that's BAWDY, body, as in woo, right? Cassandra and Persephone's timeshare poets, body corp. Olga's oligarchy, general factotum, body corp. Texas spit, laconizer, body corp. Mackenzie's river, archivist, body corp. Next page, October we are now up to. Oligarchy. We don't none of us pay much attention to each other. Maybe only to be polite and get along. Parties, yes. Committees, no. And size, not so important, I think. She's also a bit body.
Oh, yeah, I could hear that too.
Let's see. This is November. It's really a natural part of life for anyone with even a tiny bit of imagination. Forget seances, mediums, socio-physical determinations. They were just early warning systems for the fully realized man/cowboy/archivist/maid. At least that's what Olga calls herself at the moment. And don't forget the timeshare poets making this all possible. Whatever combos your bag holds, this is the fool, the bag, the fool,
Right.
right? You know, that bag on a stick that you carry over your right shoulder as you travel? After all, if you're going to spend your entire life inside a bag, you might as well make it interesting.
Oh, that's great.
Couple more.
Yes, please. Yeah, we've got time.
March this year. Cassandra's getting tired of not being heard, and she still has 2 moons before Persephone takes her shift for the year. She moans a lot, but others listen very nicely before going off in some other directions, which convinces her again that others may listen, but they do not hear. Cassandra's a bit miffed by this.
I can hear that.
And that's it. I'm at the end of that book. So that was
That's
was
lovely.
2022 and a bit of 2023 of some of my poets' meanderings.
Sounds like a bit of gathering, like you're kind of bringing everybody together, or maybe they're working together more through your poetry.
Well, I do have something here. Let's see. I was just looking for it. This is part of something which I won't go into, but it's a thing that's happening. Sort of I don't know what it is yet, a play or something. And there's a character wandering by, and somebody asked the person who's in charge of this whole business about the person who's walking by. What's the matter with him? He's being torn apart by the characters in his head. They want him to be the author they expect, and he's not. At least he refuses to write about them.
Ooh.
That's all
Wow.
it says. But
That's really good, though.
yeah.
That's deep, dude.
Yeah, that's Polk. The person who's explaining is Polk. That's his name. He's sort of a Puck combined with a native fellow.
Does he not want to hear the voices in his head, and he wants to go his own way? Or
Oh,
what do you
I
think
mean,
is
the person who's explaining the other person is
Mhm.
Polk.
Mhm.
The person who's wandering by, going, well, maybe it's this person and maybe it's that. That's epigenetic,
Right.
right?
Wow.
So
Okay.
she's wandered into this thing that's going on the trails around Victoria,
Right.
That whole thing with the paved galloping goose and ghosts and rollerblades and things like that.
That I like. So when you're writing them, do you know who you're writing them as, or is it just something you can kind of sit back and think about it later?
Some yes, some no. Maybe yes, maybe no. Sometimes I know, so you can see because the names show up. Sometimes I don't, especially art. I don't know art.
Yeah.
Until like years later. Sometimes I'll say, "Oh, that's a picture of epigenetic." I know. I don't know who's here today. It's Olga. It's Olga. Olga and kick the can. Again.
Olga kicks the can. No, I kick the can. Olga chats with us.
Olga's going to dish dirt.
Oh, I like dirt. So they had the big rumble, and we have the winner.
Well, this is Effie because this is me, right? This is the body, corporate body here. This is Effie genetics. So I'm talking and I'm saying, well, Olga talks all the time, almost, if anybody's going to speak up. Mackenzie never talks. Sometimes she writes poetry. I've read, I think, an example. I recited an example of one of her poems, which was the first time she showed up with a last name. That was like, what have you done to me? That kind of thing. And besides, she hates the way I try and fake her Scottish accent. It just never works. Tex, well, he does occasionally show up when I don't get drunk anymore, but he was really keen on showing up when I was drunk. And I'm not sure how much he's a Texan and how much he's a native Saanich, but they're very similar. Cassandra, well, she sort of spontaneously predicts things out of nowhere, but we only hear from her from November through till April, right? Mm-hmm. So she'll suddenly up and say to Phil or somebody like that, she'll make a prediction. And Persephone, well, she tries not to look forward. She doesn't make predictions. She tries not to look back. She's got a thing about looking back. Her and Hades. I don't know if you've ever looked into that. That was that whole thing with Morpheus and Eurydice, and don't look back when you're leading her out of hell. So she's got this thing about not looking back. She's the spring and the summer, and she just wants to concentrate on things that are growing. And then she writes poetry sometimes, and so does Cassandra. Let's see, who else is there? Well, Mackenzie just gets answers, right? She's the one that when I say, well, I can't remember. What was that anyways? And then, like 12 hours later, I'm coming. Here's the answer. I got the answer, She deals with the archives, right? The memories and stuff like that. Olga, she's got a mind of her own. She doesn't always show up when you want me to show up now, do you? And Mackenzie just sits there and looks at you.
Yeah.
She's got this look. She sort of makes you wonder what's open or what's closed, or what are you looking at? But really, she's just looking at you because that's the way she looks at things, very skeptically, very detached. So I know Olga was going to have something to say, and she's had almost nothing to say. But we've done a lot of research this week, and we found some interesting things. So first it started out with the idea, now this is Jung. I am not a professional Jungian, but I read a lot of his stuff. I have read a lot of his stuff. He talks a lot about individuation, which is the development of the individual, in many facets of their existence. And if you read his Red Book, which he didn't want published and wasn't published until years after he died, he starts doing that. He's got characters that are sort of fairy tale, like the Maiden in the Tower, So to me, that's what all my characters are, is individuation taken to its extreme, which is that what they're doing is they're beginning to go to seed. I'm beginning to go to seed. I'm 70 years old, right? Okay, so the bloom is going to seed, and each of those seeds has got to have its complete genetic code. It's got to be able to go off and survive by itself, hopefully, So this is breaking down into seeds, characters. Each of the characters is a kind of a seed. And then there's also the idea of evolution, not external evolution, but internal, the survival of the fittest over time. These are the characters who have been around long enough to acquire a recognizable name, voice, and personality. So that when Epigenetics first said something that I noticed last week, my immediate reaction was, who the hell is that? Because, I never heard her speak before. And she had this kind of, like I said, almost a Southern black accent,
Yeah, and you didn't know.
No, and I just kind of went, like that. And then I started looking back at my books, and I found the references to Epigenetic, which was the corporate body. It was the whole package put together. So there's an absolutely wonderful science fiction series. Julie Cerneda, I think, is the author. And in them, there's this group of aliens that come to Earth, and they have like 5 individual personalities within one body. So you have to figure out, as the ambassador to this race, who you're talking to at any given time, what part of that individual, what one of the individuals within that entity is speaking or is going to speak, or who you should address and how you should address them. I'd highly recommend it. I just can't think of the title of the series right now, but I've got it kicking around somewhere. It's a good book.
How would you address a cat?
Yeah, well, how would you address a multi-partite alien is sort of, yes, it is that kind of thing. Well, I mean, how do you address, Olga, do you want to say something? No.
None of this interests her at all.
No, not at the moment. No, she's authorities,
Oh, yeah, I feel her.
She's from, I don't know, Russia, Poland, somewhere in there, but we don't talk about that. No.
Absolutely not.
But Tex, you want me to say something, lady? Well, I'm as big as the whole state of Texas. Most people never even see me coming.
That's real, reasonable, and fair.
I think genetically he's probably related to my father's background and the prairie farmers and
Makes sense. I can hear that.
that whole kind of, you know, the parts of his members of his family that have lived in Saanich as I was growing up all have that kind of Saanich drawl. But it comes out of, I think it comes out of the prairies and partly out of a really lovely boyfriend I had when I was 21. He was red hair and handlebar mustache and was from Texas or Georgia or somewhere.
Real authentic place.
Real
like
authentic
that.
fellow. Yeah, he'd done his time. He was a rough and tough cowboy, that one boy.
Was he?
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine how a character could develop from that. That's kind of neat, though, how some of the characters almost developed on people you knew, but maybe that those were aspects of your personality that you were ready to incorporate anyway.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I never realized Tex was there or how he was related to me until probably sometime in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So probably around the time that I started really not drinking as much. And then so I kind of missed him. And then I went, oh, that's who that is. And I used to think that was the only way that I could get him, you know, to be that kind of happy-go-lucky party sort of, you know, guy who's, you know, likes big hand gestures and prairies. And, you know.
The real Tex was here all along.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably just why I was attracted to people who were like him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We see in others what we like to see in ourselves, maybe.
And vice versa. Vice versa? Something like that, yes.
I like that. All right, so we've actually met a couple of people today. We've had a little bit of a conversation with a few of them. I'm surprised to have met Tex. I feel very honored at this point, and you know.
Well, don't ruffle your feathers, sweetie.
I won't take it all on me. That's all right. That's fair. That's fair.
Oh. That's Mackenzie.
I can hear it. Goodness.
She's showing up. Well, she doesn't usually say anything.
Well, sometimes it takes feeling a little bit uncomfortable for a minute to bring new friends out.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, that's that first poem of hers that showed up. That was why it was, because I was doing that job for somebody. And he kept saying, no, this isn't what I want. No, this isn't what I want. And I kept trying and I kept trying until finally, like 5 o'clock one morning when I'm working on the project and this little poem comes out, says, because it was about Tim Leary.
Right.
And it says, Leary, what have you done to me? Poor wee, court mortal that I am. And it was signed Mackenzie Page, and she'd never had the last name before. And I remember it came out because I thought, well, it can't be Mackenzie King because she's too young, so it's got to be she's a Page, she's not a King.
Right, of course, like that, Page. But it makes sense too, because on a page, it's got a...
Yeah, and she's the archivist. She looks after files and memories and how to find things and, you know, that kind of stuff. So Pema Chodron, who's an American-born Buddhist nun who's quite elderly and lives in a Buddhist monastery in Nova Scotia, right on the very edge of the ocean. And I've been reading a couple of her books lately. And one of them had a really great story that she's told in several places, as far as I can tell. I'm just sorry. She was trying to understand what the bardo was. I have to say, I still don't know. But she asked the teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, Anam Tub 10, whatever that means. And so she said, well, Rinpoche, which means basically teacher, you and I are sitting here having lunch. How is this the bardo? This morning, he said, I went to the art store with my friend to buy materials for doing calligraphy. We bought some ink and brushes and paper. Now, that experience seems like a past lifetime, a whole lifetime of its own. It had a beginning, which was like being born. Then it lasted for a while and went through different phases, looking around the store, picking out the supplies, paying for them. Then my friend and I parted, and that lifetime came to an end. Now it's all just a memory, and here I am eating lunch with you, enjoying another lifetime. Soon this lifetime will come to an end and turn into another memory. And this process of beginnings and endings, births and deaths, will never cease. It will go on and on and on forever.
Ooh.
Isn't that a lovely little story?
That is. And how do you identify with that story?
Well, it sort of ties in with what I was talking about previously, which was the idea of individuation, development of individual personalities, survival of the fittest, evolution, budding, getting seeds ready to send off into the universe. So it's like the survival of the fittest part of it is what I just read, in a sense, because it's saying you think you're one person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a schizophrenic diagnosis is just a little too simplistic, or maybe they are schizophrenic and they should be a lot more of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you think about that, what he's saying is that there's all these different people all acting as if they're one person all in a row. So,
and maybe in a positive light, because I think a lot of times in media, it's not portrayed in a positive light. Everybody's always trying to bring these personalities together instead of exploring them individually. But
yeah, although I think it's sort of just through the looking glass. It's two sides of the same thing. I mean, first you have to become an individual, and then you have to become many individuals, right? So, I mean, at least that's the way it seems to me. I hope nobody takes my word for it. I'm not a professional.
That's what we say on the podcast all the time.
I mean, I'm a professional mad woman, but I don't think that counts in terms of degrees.
Well, I mean, you might be surprised. Well, I put together a couple of questions for you and see if some of them are relevant. But my first question before I say any of it is, if I'm addressing you all encompassing, does it make a difference? Am I just asking you, Nori, the question, or am I saying, hey guys, what's up? I got a question. I don't know.
Think of me as one giant switchboard, most of the time unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the party to whom I am speaking? So I'm just really the person that deals with everyone is whoever happens to be the operator at the moment, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I still have long periods of feeling that I'm only one person.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just they're sequential, not, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't all exist at the same time. I keep saying, wouldn't it be great to have a big party? Speaking of parties, and
yes.
Here's a picture you can stick up because I just love this.
Ooh.
This is a picture of the cast of the modern dance company's production under Crystal Pite of Revisor, which is actually a take on Gogol's Inspector General. That's actually the proper translation of the title. But, the way they're posed, I mean, it's an unusual dance because all of the voices are recorded by professional actors. And then they mimic them. They mime what is being said while they're doing all these really exaggerated movements, and it's all about slapstick. That's what they're studying, right? But to me, this is like a perfect example of an individual, like in Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's the main person, and this is a lovely he. It's a male part, so it's a trouser roll, basically. Mm-hmm. And she's got this lovely look on her face because she's, when I first saw it, I thought it was a man. And then I looked closer and realized it wasn't. And so all of these are like, doing super slapstick, but they're like the interior characters behind her, right? And she's this ambiguous person of either gender ambiguous, that's the word for the operator, for Ernestine or whatever her name is. It Ernestine? I can't remember. Yeah. So, I mean, what I would love to do is to draw a picture of me. That would be epigenetic in the center with my characters around in similar poses. I've been thinking of that for a couple of years, ever since I think I've seen this photograph I think I saw it for the first time just before COVID hit. And then they had to shut down their ballet and their touring. And then I didn't hear much about them until about a couple of years later. So.
Now they're back at it again, though?
Yeah, although they moved on to a different production, I think, by now. But she never stops. She's quite a live wire, Crystal Pite. I saw one of her productions at the Royal Theatre in Victoria back when I was taking dancing classes about maybe 20 years ago, and it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So my question, is there a preference to any one of your personalities that you like over another? Is there like, oh, no, not this one again? Or are you always kind of like, oh, interesting? It's like, are you observing it and just seeing it? Or do you have an opinion in that way?
Well, the trouble with that whole thing is that there isn't really an I in this process, right? That's there's that lovely conversation I found it somewhere online between Pema Chodron, who's the Buddhist nun whose piece I just read, talking about Leonard Cohen, right? And she said, he said this lovely thing about when he was at the monastery in California for so long. He said, I enjoy my day a lot more the less of me there is there. Something like that. I think I'm terribly misquoting, but so it isn't. There isn't a sense of it's you, except afterwards, especially if somebody else is there, like Phil,
Mhm.
and something comes out of my mouth, and I go, like I did with the first time I really noticed that. Wait a minute, who's that? That was epigenetic, right? So you've heard me go through the process of identification and sorting, and then going back and finding the correspondence in my background.
Mhm.
And we go back a long ways. We do occasionally speak as a we, by the
Yes.
way.
So that almost answers that question then, right? How do you feel about your different parts of your who you are? In a way, I'd like. Do you have a favorite one or one that you identify with the most? That's kind of most like you, or are they all because they are you? There would be no way to answer that question.
No, I don't. Like I said, I do try and encourage them to get together, but it hasn't happened yet. I keep writing these little scenes where they all end up sitting around a table, but it's like I can't get them to move. They just, I'm not going to do this. Nope. I'm cooperative bunch sometimes.
I imagine they could be. Are there, like, if you were to say try to tap into one personality, like, oh, today's a writing day, is that how you would do it? Be, well, maybe Effie's going to come out, I'm going to do some writing. Does it ever happen that way around?
No, sometimes they'll be, that would be a neat thing to do, and then maybe an hour later I do it or I don't. I mean, it gets done or it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Not I do it or I don't.
Yeah, it works. So I'm asking if each of them bring a unique perspective to your relationships or interactions with either people or art. And that's, I mean, you've kind of already described that. Certain ones just make more sense in certain situations. So they're like, oh yeah, I've peaked out. This is where I want to be. Okay, yeah, well,
I like being drunk. That's Tex. We haven't heard much from him because I don't drink anymore. At least not this time around.
No other activities is really much into.
Well, he makes the occasional political comment.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the subject of Texas comes up, he likes Lyle. What's his name?
Lyle Lovett.
Lyle Lovett. He loves Lyle Lovett. Yes. That's
you?
right. You're not from Texas.
Oh, that song too.
Yeah.
Do you like Lyle Lovett?
Some of the time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's Tex. I don't know.
In the mood for it? Or he's in the mood for it and you're along for the ride?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, sometimes I'm in the mood to play one of my collections when I'm out walking that I haven't, I've been building for like 13 years. And it has a real cross section, including 2 or 3 of his, I think. That one's one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. That one and the one about being in church and being really hungry and the preacher keeps talking a mile a minute. And I went, I know that. I've been there before.
So I guess my question is, my last question I have is, do you have a sense of balance at all that you even try to maintain? Does it matter if one comes out once and you don't see somebody else for a few months? Like, is there any part of you that says, okay, let's get some fair time in, everybody join me? Or is it just kind of okay either way?
Working with the breath to give birth to the next moment. It's one of the images that's somewhere in this process.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to think too far ahead or too far back. Julia Cameron, the Artist's Way author that I'm rereading at the moment, talks about that. She said sometimes, you just can't handle facing the future or the past. All you could do is just take one breath after another. It's basically the same. Getting old is not for sissies. You're sort of insulated, I think, by the effects of the biochemistry up to a point, and then you're on your own.
You're on your own, kid. We never said you were going to live this long anyways. You're over the age of 45.
Yeah, 40 actually.
Yeah.
Well, then they revised it to 30 at one point, but maybe that was only in Hollywood. I don't know. It was some movie. No, it was 30 in the movie, and then at the end of the movie, some kid goes, "Everybody over 20 is dead." After everybody over 30 has gotten all the people over 30 into concentration camps in Florida.
Oh, goodness. I even remember thinking as a kid, over 30 was in the establishment, so you weren't supposed to say anything to anybody over 30, man.
Well, that's good. So, thank you so much for talking to me, answering the questions, talking about the characters. I don't know where this will lead, so let's see where it goes, and swim up or down that stream, the thought stream.
The yes, thought stream. There was something about swimming. Oh yeah, it was something about flowing downstream and being old. Maybe by next week I'll remember where it was. It was a poem, sometime in the last year or so. Thanks.
Thank you.